The night before her wedding, Naomi discovered the man she loved wasn't her fiancé. He was her brother, Naomi. Thorne had never believed in fate. Not really. She believed in chance, in consequence, in the strange way life unraveled in crooked lines, no matter how carefully you tried to walk them straight. But as she stood in her apartment boxes of white roses on the floor and a pressed wedding dress hanging behind her, she felt something else, something colder, older begin to rise inside her like memory, like grief. The letter in her hand trembled. It wasn't long, a single-page DNA, confirmation printed with clinical neatness and impossible truth, sibling match 99. 98%. She sat down carefully on the edge of her bed. Eli's toothbrush was still in the bathroom. His socks were still curled on the floor near the dresser, and all she could see was the scar, the one he never remembered getting curved like a lightning bolt, just beneath his hairline. The same scar her little brother Micah had when he was taken. But that wasn't where the story began. The story began 20 years earlier, in a foster home. 2 towns north of Tallahassee. Naomi was 9, Michael was 4. Their mother, Eliza, had overdosed 3 months earlier, and the state had been kind enough to keep them together, at least for a little while. Naomi remembered the smell of the place, more than anything, sour milk, old wood, and the ever-lingering scent of Lysol. The foster mother was thin and distracted, and the man she lived with was worse. Naomi had learned quickly not to make noise, not to ask questions, not to speak unless spoken to. But Micah was soft and curious. He hummed when he played. He cried at night. Naomi used to press her hand over his chest while he slept, just to feel it rise and fall, proof that something she loved was still alive. And then one morning he was gone. They told her he'd been moved to another home, reassigned. No one explained why, and when Naomi asked to see him, they told her it wasn't possible. When she screamed, they sedated her. She never saw him again. Adoption records were sealed. The state changed his name. Naomi spent the next 9 years bouncing between group homes, foster placements, and temporary shelters. By 17, she was legally emancipated. By 19, she was invisible. And then at 25, she met Eli. They collided at a pop-up gallery downtown. Her niece was showing sculpture, and he was there with his sketchbook, and the kind of eyes that noticed everything. They talked about art, about jazz, about how Florida humidity ruined your hair, no matter how you styled it. It wasn't instant love. It was slower, like sunlight warming a closed room. Eli was kind and patient, deeply private, but always made her feel heard. He worked as a freelance designer and painted at night, quiet oil pieces of faceless figures and lonely landscapes. He didn't talk much about his childhood, only said he was adopted late and raised by a single mother in Savannah. Naomi never questioned it. Why would she? She buried her past so deep, she barely visited it. Herself, they dated for 3 years, lived together for 2. And when he proposed, quiet, nervous, on one knee in the living room, with a ring that didn't quite fit, she said yes before he even finished the sentence. They planned a small ceremony. Friends only, no parents, no extended family. Neither had much in the way of blood ties, or so they thought. And then, 1 week before the wedding, Naomi's niece Tasha came over to drop off a handmade bouquet holder. She spotted a charcoal sketch hanging in Eli's studio. "That's beautiful," Tasha said. "Did you do it?" Eli nodded. "One of my older ones." Naomi looked over his shoulder and froze. It was a child's drawing. A lopsided sunflower with 7 petals, each petal labelled with a letter. "Am I Santa?" Naomi stared at it. "Where'd you get that?" she asked too quietly. Eli blinked. "Well, I've had it forever, since I was a kid. I used to keep it folded in a box. My mum said it was one of the only things I came with." When I was adopted, Naomi's mouth went dry. She remembered that drawing. She made it when she was 8. A flower for her little brother, Mike Nathaniel Thorne. She remembered how the markers bled through the paper. She remembered how he clapped when she showed it to him. She hadn't seen it in 20 years that night. After Eli fell asleep, Naomi dug through the old documents she kept in a plastic bin under her bed. Foster care notes, old photos, a medical form that listed Micah's birthmark, a lightning-shaped scar near the temple from a childhood fall. She woke up shaking the next day, while Eli was out for final suit fittings. She drove to a clinic 2 counties over. That processed rapid DNA tests. She used the toothbrush from his travel bag and a strand of her own hair 5 days. It only took 5 days. The results came in a thin envelope, with no return address. She opened it on her bed with the wedding dress behind her, and her whole world about to collapse. She thought she might scream, but she didn't. She just sat there, breathing, her hands shaking, because somewhere, deep down in the part of her heart that had never truly healed, she already knew the way Eli looked when he slept. The scar, the sunflower drawing, was always him. She had fallen in love with her little brother, and tomorrow was supposed to be their wedding day. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark, knees pulled to her chest. The DNA report on the nightstand, like it might start whispering. The wedding dress still hung in the corner, moonlight brushing the edge of the satin train. Everything was ready. The florist had confirmed the delivery. The chairs were already set up on the lawn behind the gallery. Her niece had dropped off the guest book and signed the first page with, "You two were meant for each other." Naomi hadn't cried yet. Not really. Tears would come later, when she was no longer afraid of them. Eli stirred sometime, after 4 a.m., rolling toward the empty space in the bed, and reaching for her like he always did. "Babe?" He mumbled, voice full of sleep. She didn't answer, just held her breath, waited until his breathing settled again. She left the apartment at dawn by 800 a.m. She was standing in front of a 1-story home on the edge of Gadsden County, staring at a crooked mailbox and a faded blue door. The woman who answered was older than Naomi remembered, her hair grayer, skin drawn thin around the mouth, but her eyes were still sharp. "Tired but sharp, Naomi Thorne," she said, blinking. "I haven't heard that name in years." Naomi nodded. "Hi, Miss Darla." The woman stepped aside to let her in without a word. The house hadn't changed. Same floral curtains, same old magazines stacked on the coffee table, a crucifix hung on the wall beside a dusty graduation photo. Someone else's kid, not hers. "I need to ask you something," Naomi said, her voice flat. Miss Darla sank into the same armchair she used to occupy when she filled out placement paperwork. "I figured you would." Naomi pulled out the DNA results. "Did Micah get adopted?" The woman's lips pressed together, but she didn't look surprised. "Yes, he did when, about 6 months after you were placed in transitional housing, the family was from out of state Georgia. Couple in their late 30s, couldn't have kids." Naomi's hands curled into fists. "And no one told me you were a minor, and the adoption was closed. You wouldn't have been able to see him anyway." "He was my brother," Naomi said quietly. "The only family I had left, I know." Darla's voice softened. "But we followed protocol. That's all we could do." Naomi looked down at her lap. "Did you ever see him again?" she asked. "Not once," Naomi nodded. She stood slowly, as if gravity had grown thicker in the room. "Thank you, Naomi," Darla said before she reached the door. "For what it's worth, I always hoped you two would find each other again. Just not like this." Naomi left without responding. The drive home was a blur. Every stoplight flickered like a heartbeat. Every radio station sounded like a funeral. By the time she walked through the door, Eli was already awake. He was sitting on the couch, barefoot, elbows on his knees, holding a familiar envelope. In both hands, Naomi froze in the doorway. "You opened it," she said. Eli looked up. His face was pale, drained of all colour. "I didn't know what it was. It was sticking out of the drawer." He held it out to her, like it might burn him. "Is this real?" Naomi didn't speak. She walked over, sat down slowly beside him. "I didn't know." She whispered. His throat bobbed. "Micah." The name sounded strange in his mouth, like trying on someone else's jacket. She nodded. "I thought it was a mistake," he said. "I thought it had to be." I remembered the drawing. "And God, Naomi, why didn't you tell me? I wasn't sure." She said, "Not at first." And now I saw the scar, the sunflower, the name. They sat in silence. The fridge hummed in the background. Outside traffic passed like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. "I didn't do anything wrong," Eli said, suddenly. "Neither of us did. We didn't know." I know, his voice cracked. "Then why do I feel like I'm going to be sick?" Naomi closed her eyes. "Because you loved me," she said, "and I loved you. And now that love has nowhere to go." He stood up abruptly, crossed the room, rubbed the back of his neck like the words were trying to escape through his skin. "I don't remember anything from back then," he said. "Not her, not the house, but I remember singing. I remember someone holding my hand. During a thunderstorm, Naomi looked. Up, that was me." He turned eyes wet. "I need to get out of here," he said. Naomi stood but didn't follow. "Where will you go?" "I don't know." He walked toward the bedroom, threw some clothes into a bag, grabbed his phone, his keys at the door. He stopped. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it, you don't have to be." He didn't reply. The door closed softly behind him, and Naomi stood in the center of the apartment, staring at the half-packed suitcase still sitting in the corner, her wedding dress hung on the hook behind the door. Tomorrow, she was supposed to marry him. Instead, she was alone again, and her brother, her baby brother, had just walked out of her life. A second time, the wedding was called off quietly. Naomi sent a text to the officiant, first then her niece, then the florist postponed. "Due to personal emergency," she wrote. "I'll reach out when we're ready to reschedule." There were no more words in her, just silence. The day that was supposed to be full of celebration passed like a ghost. The catering truck still showed up at the venue. Confused, her niece came by with flowers, asking questions. Naomi couldn't answer. She gave no real explanation, just sat on the couch, hands wrapped around a cold mug of tea that had been reheated twice and never touched. The apartment still smelled like him. His guitar sat propped against the wall where he'd left it, his hoodie still draped over the back of the chair, but the air felt hollow now, like something sacred had been disturbed, like a room where a storm had passed, but left all the furniture perfectly intact. Naomi went back to work the next day. The library was quiet, it always was. That was the blessing of books. They expected nothing from you. They didn't stare or pity or prod, they just waited to be opened. She spent the entire morning in the archive section, sorting donations, pretending not to exist. That afternoon she went back to the box. It was the same box she'd carried with her through 5 apartments. Inside were the only remnants of her childhood, a faded school photo, a beaded bracelet she once made with mica, and the original sunflower drawing she'd sketched in the corner of a shelter rec room. She laid it on the table and compared it side by side with the one Eli had kept. All his life, the crease down the middle was identical, the smudge on the corner from her hand. The crooked M she always drew. It wasn't a coincidence. It was proof. She pressed her hand to her mouth, the tears coming quietly, now not from sadness but from how violently the truth had been hiding in plain sight. That night, her niece Tasha came over. She brought soup, didn't ask questions, just sat on the couch and scrolled through her phone while Naomi stared out the window. After a while, Tasha spoke. "You're not okay." Naomi didn't answer. "You're not okay," she repeated, "but you will be." Naomi turned to look at her. Tasha had her mother's eyes, Naomi's sister, who died before Micah ever learned to write his own name. Her whole family had fallen apart, piece by piece, and now it felt like this was just one final crack along the foundation. "I can't tell you what happened," Naomi said. "Not yet." Tasha nodded. "Okay, I didn't do anything wrong. Neither did he. I believe you. I need to figure out what to do with that." Tasha placed the soup down and hugged her. No pressure, no questions, just warmth. Naomi didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she walked through the city, past the closed flower shops and shuttered bookstores, past the old corner where Eli had once sketched strangers. In a notebook, she ended up standing in front of the art gallery. They used to visit every first Friday of the month. A new exhibit was on display. The lights were off, but through the window she could see a painting, broad strokes of dark blue and gold. A figure standing alone in a sunflower field. Her heart stopped. It was his work, she'd know it anywhere. 2 days later, an envelope arrived in the mail, no return address, just her name in handwriting. She knew better than her own. Inside a letternet, Naomi. "I don't know what to say. I don't think there's a word for what this is, what we are. You were the only thing in my life that ever felt whole, real, and I think that's because you always were. I remember something a moment. I don't know if it's real. There was a thunderstorm. I was hiding under a blanket, Someone held my hand and told me, I'll never let them take you. I think that was you. I don't hate you. I can't. I just don't know how to be near you right now. I'm painting again every night. I don't sleep much. I painted that storm, the one I think I remember, and the sunflower. I'll send you photos someday maybe, or not, you can keep the drawing. The original, it was always yours anyway. I hope you're okay. I hope someday I'll be okay too. Naomi held the letter to her chest and sat on the floor until the sun rose. She didn't write back, not yet, but she took the two drawings, hers and his, and framed them side by side. And she waited not for love, not for healing, just for the first quiet breath after the storm. Weeks after the letter, Naomi finally found the strength to open Eli's sketchbook. He'd left it behind, unintentionally. Or not, she wasn't sure. It was tucked between the couch cushions, leather-bound and worn along the edges. She sat at the kitchen table and turned each page slowly, as if they might disintegrate under her fingertips. Page after page was filled with her, not an exact likeness, not portraits, but outlines, movements, a laugh caught in charcoal, her silhouette leaning into sunlight, her hand extended with a sunflower between two fingers. Sometimes her eyes detailed so meticulously she had to close her own just to breathe. And in between the sketches, tiny bursts of memory, a treehouse, a single sock, a thunderstorm. Naomi didn't cry. Not right away, the grief was different now. Not sharp, just vast, like sitting in the middle of a dried-out lake bed, and remembering how deep it used to be. Eli hadn't returned to the apartment. He hadn't reached out again. And still every room whispered him. One morning, Naomi walked into his studio quietly, like the walls might still feel his footsteps. She stood before the easel and touched the half-finished painting he'd been working on before the truth. Unravelled them, a figure in a raincoat, back turned, walking away through a field of blue and gold. It wasn't labelled, but she knew the title, Micah Naomi. Left the studio door open after that. In mid-June, she received a call. It was from Eli's adoptive mother, Lenora. Naomi hadn't expected to ever hear her voice. The last time they'd spoken, it had been at an art show before the engagement. Lenora had hugged Naomi tight, called her a breath of light for her son. Now her voice trembled. I heard what happened, she said. No preamble. Eli told me. Naomi stood at her kitchen counter, the kettle boiling behind her, unmoving. I don't know what to say, Lenora continued, except I'm sorry I didn't know. Naomi's voice was calm but tight. You adopted him. Yes, do you remember where he came from? There was a pause. I was told his name was Micah, that his mother had passed. I didn't ask too many questions. I thought I was being merciful, giving him a home. I didn't think there was someone still out there searching for him. There was, Naomi said softly. I would have done something different if I had known, I swear. Naomi exhaled. I don't blame you. I didn't raise him to hide from love, Lenora said, and I didn't raise him to feel ashamed of who he is. I just hope he can forgive the world for taking so much from him. Naomi didn't respond, but she was grateful for the call, even if it didn't fix anything. That summer was slow. She kept herself busy, archiving, volunteering at the local youth centre, cooking for neighbours. She stayed away from downtown, avoided the coffee shop where they first met, steered clear of the gallery. But his music still found her on social media. People began sharing clips from an anonymous exhibit in Atlanta charcoal. Portraits, shadowed eyes, paintings of children standing under sunflowers. She knew his work even without a name. One evening, Naomi came home to find a small envelope under her doormat. No stamp, no return address, just a pressed sunflower inside, and a note on the back of a paint label gallery showing Friday 7 p. M58 Mercer. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't decide to go until she was already in the car. Halfway there, the gallery was dimly lit, minimalistic concrete floors, tall windows, the kind of place where whispers sounded louder than footsteps. She stepped inside slowly, unsure what she'd find, unsure if she'd find him at all. But the moment she saw the wall of paintings, she knew Eli's work was everywhere. Figures submerged in water, children alone in fields, two silhouettes facing opposite directions under a storm cloud. One painting showed a girl sitting on a swing, holding a toy lion. Her face blurred but unmistakably familiar. And then at the far end of the room, the largest canvas, a sunflower field in the middle, stood a woman facing away, hair blowing in the wind at her feet. A child knelt, planting a second flower beside hers. Naomi stood in front of it for a long time. "Did you like it?" a voice asked from behind her. She turned. Eli was thinner, paler, but his eyes, those same soft, wondering eyes, held everything she remembered, and more, she nodded. "It's beautiful," he smiled faintly. "You came? I wasn't sure I would. I wasn't sure I wanted you to." They stood in silence, the weight of months hanging between them, like an unspoken apology. "I meant to write again," he said. "You didn't have to." "I did, I just didn't know what to say." Naomi looked back at the sunflower painting. "You said it." They stayed for the rest of the show, side by side, never touching. They spoke to no one else, just drifted through the space. Quietly, orbiting one another, like stars pulled back into the same sky. When the night ended, they walked out into the warm air. He walked her to her car, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. "I don't know what we are now," he said. "You're my brother," she said gently. He looked up. "Does that erase everything else?" "No," she said, "but it lets us rewrite what's next." He nodded, swallowed, then leaned forward. Not for a kiss, not even a hug, just a moment, forehead resting against hers, like they were children again, sharing silence under a blanket during a thunderstorm. She closed her eyes. Neither of them said goodbye. They didn't need to. They'd already found each other. Once they knew how to do it again, Naomi didn't expect him to call. Not right away, not after the gallery night, not after all they had said and left unsaid. Standing beside canvases that spoke in silence better than words ever could. But 2 weeks later, her phone buzzed, just past 900 p.m. Micah, she had changed the contact. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." His voice was steadier this time, like the storm had passed through his chest and left the debris somewhere else. There was quiet music in the background, a vinyl crackle, a slow piano. "I'm back in town," he said. "Just for a few days. I wanted to see you." Naomi didn't hesitate. "Okay." He came by that evening. No warning, no build-up, just the soft knock on her door, the way he always used to. 3 quick taps, then one pause like a question mark. She opened it. He looked older somehow. Tired, yes, but more grounded. His curls had grown out. He was wearing paint, splattered jeans, and a clean, white t-shirt around his neck. A small change she didn't recognize. They didn't hug. She stepped aside to let him in, and he walked straight to the couch where his old hoodie still hung from the back. Rest folded now, untouched. Since he left, Naomi made do. They sat not across from each other, but side by side. The city outside was loud with summer heat, tires skimming pavement, neighbours laughing on porches, someone's TV leaking through the open window, but inside it was just the creak of old wood, and 2 people trying to rebuild something that never had a name. "I got your flower," she said finally. "I thought you might." He paused, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a sketchbook. "I've been drawing again, but not for galleries, just for myself." She flipped through, carefully. This time, the drawings were different. No faceless silhouettes, no blurred childhood scenes. These were real, honest, a girl on a swing, a boy in a striped shirt with a crooked grin. Their mother's smile imagined from memory. Naomi sitting on a curb, hugging her knees at the very back, was a portrait of the 2 of them. As children, hand in hand under a sunflower sky. She blinked fast, clearing her throat. "And these are beautiful. I wanted to remember," he said. Naomi looked at him. "Do you have pieces and flashes that scar you told me about? I see it sometimes in dreams in the song, the one you used to sing." She smiled. "I didn't think you'd remember that. It's not in my mind," he said. "It's in my bones." He turned to face her, fully for the first time. "I've spent months trying to figure out what we were, what we are. And the truth is, I don't know if I'll ever be able to undo the feelings I had before we knew. But I don't regret them, either." Naomi didn't flinch, and neither do I. Silence settled again. "Gentle now. I talked to Lenora," she said. "Your mum." His expression shifted. Not anger, not pain, just complicated softness. She called me too, he said. She cried a lot. She didn't know Micah. She loved you. I know he said I love her too, but part of me hates that so many people kept me from you. Naomi nodded me too. But I think I want to stop being angry, he added. I think I want to start being your brother for real this time. She smiled, eyes glistening. You already are. Later that night, they walked same block, same sidewalk. They passed the cafe. They used to sit outside the bookstore, where she once found him sketching strangers in a corner. But everything looked different now, not tainted, just deeper, like it had history. They ended up at the waterfront, where the bridge light shimmered across the river, and the benches creaked when you leaned too hard. Micah sat, pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. I've been writing again, lyrics, mostly music, maybe not yet, still figuring it out. He handed her the phone. She read quietly. It was a poem, a soft one about finding someone you already lost, about two hearts that were separated by time but not by love, about how family isn't always what you remember. Sometimes it's what you rediscover. She handed the phone back. It's beautiful. It's true. They sat in stillness for a while. The wind tugged at her sleeve. Somewhere behind them, a dog barked. Laughter echoed from the pier. Micah reached into his shirt and pulled the chain from under it. At the end hung a small gold charm, a sunflower. I had it made, he said. One for you, one for me. She didn't say anything, just reached forward and touched it lightly, with her finger like a button that could turn the world gentle again. He held out a second charm, identical. She took it without a word and looped it through her necklace. And just like that, they matched again. Like they had before the world split them apart and gave them different names, before love confused what was always blood before the storm. She looked at him. Come home, she said. He nodded, and they walked back together, not as lovers, not as strangers, but as what they were always meant to be. Brother and sister found the first time Micah came over for dinner again. Naomi didn't know what to make, not the food she could handle, that she roasted chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, added a salad just in case he was still pretending to be healthy. But it was everything else she didn't know what to do with the plates, the lighting, the air between them. What do you cook for a brother you once thought might be your future? What do you say when the quiet between bites still carries old echoes? But Micah showed up right on time. No awkward pause at the door, no hesitation in his hug, just warmth, real and steady. The kind of embrace that didn't ask permission, the kind you don't give unless you mean it. They ate on the balcony. And then Naomi talked about her work, her niece's latest disaster wedding. She was helping to plan. Micah listened, smiled, told her about the art class. He started teaching twice a week at a youth centre. She asked if he liked it. I love it, he said. It feels like something that gives back what I lost. She nodded. That's a good kind of work. They didn't mention the past that night. Not the adoption, not the wedding that wasn't, not the photo. Naomi still kept framed in her hallway of the two of them, at that gallery, standing apart but looking in the same direction. Some things didn't need to be spoken again. Summer rolled gently into fall. They started seeing each other, more casual, easy siblings, at last. One Saturday, Micah helped Naomi repaint the nursery. She'd never converted it after Micah disappeared, never turned it into an office or a guest room for years. It had stayed exactly the same, yellow wallpaper, moon and star trim, a crib she couldn't bear to take down. But now it was time they left the mural. They painted over the rest. It's still got good bones, Micah said, wiping his hands on a rag, streeing soft cream-coloured paint. Like us, Naomi replied, smiling. Micah nodded, a quiet grin pulling at his mouth. That night before leaving, he paused at the door and looked around the apartment. Feels smaller than I remember, he said. You lived in it for less than an hour, Naomi said, teasing. I lived in it long enough, he said. She gave him a look. I mean enough to matter. He added, more serious now. And she understood what he meant, that even the smallest beginnings still count, if they lead you home. Weeks passed. Micah's art students began showcasing their own work, children, with rough pasts, deep feelings, and a need to be seen. Naomi attended their first show and nearly cried when a 10-year-old boy introduced his painting as a sunflower dream. Micah had inspired that he was planting hope, now in soil they used to feel barren. Naomi was healing too. She started therapy again. Not for grief this time, but for reconstruction, for the long work of making peace. With the versions of herself, she used to be the girl who lost everything, the woman who fell in love without knowing why, the sister who never stopped searching. One evening in early November, Micah brought over a gift. It was a vinyl record pressed by a small indie label that liked his sketches and asked to use them. For a cover, the artist on the album was unknown. But the first song caught Naomi's breath. She recognized the lyrics. I wrote it, Micah said, watching her face. You didn't tell me I wasn't ready? He took out a turntable from his bag, an old one they'd found at a thrift store together 2 years before, plugged it in, dropped the needle. The song was soft piano, slow drums, a voice that sounded like Mika's, but younger, lighter. Maybe it was someone else, but the words were his. I dreamed of a hand in the dark. Slash said they'd never let go. Slash thunder in the sky. Slash. But I wasn't alone. I dreamed of a field full of gold. Slash. Where a voice called my name. Slash said, come back, slash, you were never too far. And I ran, slash, through the years, slash, through the names they gave me, slash, and I found you there. You remembered me. Naomi didn't speak, Micah didn't either. When the song ended, he turned the volume down and looked at her. I think I finally feel whole, he said. Naomi touched the edge of the vinyl sleeve on the cover. 2 figures walking through a sunflower field, backs turned, but holding hands. I'm proud of you, she said. I'm proud of us. They didn't need anything else that night. Not conversation, not closure. They sat on the couch side by side, just listening. The quiet was soft now. And when Naomi looked at him, her brother, her found family, she didn't see tragedy anymore. She saw a second chance, a life rerouted, a love reshaped, and she knew the story would never fit neatly into a box. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even redemption. It was just this, a boy who was lost and a girl who never stopped waiting, and how somehow, against everything, he found his way.